fun. I think we started. I know we still have people coming in, but in the interest of time, we want to kick off. Good afternoon. I'm Margaret Mueller, the President and CEO of the Executives Club of Chicago. Thank you so much for joining us for today's program on presidential election analysis. For those of you who have not joined us for a program yet this season, we're using a new platform, GoToWebinar. You'll notice a few how-to instructions on your screen right now. So basically, if you hover your mouse in the top right-hand corner, there's a small orange arrow. Clicking this opens up the control panel, and then there's several drop-down arrows. You can open up a handout with information showing you how. We also have information about today's program, and then there's a drop-down where you can ask questions of our panelists. I know that we're going to try to get to as many of those as we can. If you have any technical issues, just email programs@executivesclub.org, and a member of the team will be in touch. So today, we find ourselves 2 weeks from an election like none we have ever seen, which is why the Executives Club wanted to sit down with our special guest today to unpack the latest numbers, polls, predictions, and more, and to talk about what's at stake in this presidential election and the impact that various outcomes may have both on our lives and our businesses in the months and years to come. Many thanks to our presenting sponsor today, Kivit, for their support of this program. Eric Sedler, who's the managing partner at Kivit, is here with us to introduce our speakers right after this quick message.
Well, thanks, Margaret. Thanks for letting us do that little commercial. We are doing some work for the Chicago Board of Elections to try to increase turnout here in Chicago, so we're hopefully doing our part. Listen, thanks everybody for being here today. We're proud to be supporting the Executives Club and the program. As Margaret said, the election is just around the corner. The news coverage on this election is it's overwhelming. It seems to be everywhere, but at the same time, it seems like it's difficult to get real, serious, thoughtful analysis of what's really going on. And even though Alex and Rahm are somewhat partisan, they are very, very serious, substantive people who have important insights for us. So we are fortunate to have them both here. So our panelists, Alex and Rahm, again, hopefully they will help us understand what's going on here a little better than we do at the moment. Alex is the co-founder of Purple Strategies, and he's worked on campaigns for Republicans such as George W. Bush, Jeb Bush, and Mitt Romney. Mayor Emanuel, mayor of Chicago from 2011 to 2019, also served as an advisor to Bill Clinton, chief of staff to President Barack Obama, and served in the U.S. House of Representatives. They're joined here today by Laura Washington, who we all know has a must-read column in the Chicago Sun-Times, and as well as contributes on ABC News here in Chicago. So there's lots to talk about. Let me just hand it over to Laura now and let you take it from here.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure and honor to be part of this program today and to hear from all of you and be part of this very powerful panel. I'd just like to first just set the stage with a little bit of information. The most recent polling, the polling averages from Real Clear Politics, with Real Clear Politics national polling average has Joe Biden up by 8.5 percentage points. That's as of today. In the top battlegrounds, must-win states, Biden is up by 4 points. But his margins appear to have been shrinking in the last week or so. We just have less than 2 weeks to go to the election, but there's so much more ahead. Amy Coney Barrett is likely to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate to join the Supreme Court. There are dire warnings that America is in its second wave of the COVID crisis. Former President Barack Obama is out on the campaign trail, big time for the first time today for Joe Biden. And tomorrow we have the final presidential debate, which, at least to me anyway, is shaping up to be a very big show. We're going to talk about all that and more with Rahm Emanuel and Alex Castellanos. And I'd like to start with both of you by asking Alex and Rahm, if you could speed up the election, if let's say the election would take place tomorrow, tell us who you think would win and why, and any advice you'd have for the candidate that you're saying is not going to win.
You want to go first, Alex? You're a guest in Chicago.
All right. Appreciate that. First, thank you for having me today, and thank you for the opportunity, Laura, to be with you and with Mayor Rahm, who is a good friend of my partner, Steve McMahon, and one of the few Democrats I'd ever vote for, Mayor Rahm. I hope that doesn't ruin your reputation in Chicago.
It just did. It's passed now.
But if I could speed the election up, who would win this thing, Laura? Is that the question?
Yes, who, if the election were tomorrow, who would win?
I don't know that it would be any different than if it's 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks ago, or 100 years ago. I'm not sure this election has changed much at all because of the big, powerful dynamics under it. It's all about Donald Trump, and everybody knows who Donald Trump is. And so you're either voting for or against Donald Trump. And I feel sometimes like with this has been a bit of a circus, and it's been entertaining, sometimes too entertaining. But I'm not sure we've had much of an impact on that. There's big, powerful forces out there. Do you want Donald Trump was elected because a lot of his voters, they didn't think they were what's wrong with the country. They didn't think they were the problem. They thought they were working people who weren't victims, but who weren't being respected by their own government. And I'm not sure the alternatives for those voters has changed at all.
So
And
Alex,
so
you're saying that you see, it sounds like you're saying that Biden would be the winner. Is that the case? And if so, what
Well,
advice do you have for
if
Trump?
it were today, I'd say Joe Biden is, and if it were 2 weeks from now, I still think Biden probably going to win this thing. But I'll offer you an alternative scenario that Republicans are clinging to. And I've been talking to some Republican pollsters over the past few weeks. What's going on out there? You look at these numbers, and I think Biden is up 2 points in Iowa. He's up 1.5 points in Florida on the real clear political average. In some of these Rust Belt states, it's tightening up. Michigan, it's a few points. What's going on? And Republican pollsters are telling me that America has either gotten a lot more educated all of a sudden, or something's happening. The educated, suburban, college-educated voter, they're happy to take a poll and tell a pollster or anybody they're cool. They understand Donald Trump is uncool and a reprehensible human being, and they're not voting for him. But the Trump voter that Donald Trump says he loves, the lower educated, the core of his base, they're harder to reach now. And there's a possibility here that those voters are like guerrilla warriors, that they want to blow the world up. They want to send a message. And so they may be lurking in the shadows this time again. If it's true that these surveys are coming back more highly educated than usual, Donald Trump could have another 2, 3, 4 point bump in some of these states that we don't see right now. And if that's the case, he could win it. My guess is that what'll happen is he'll win some state. We'll be shocked election night. There'll be some states, Florida, where, oh my God, he overperformed again. Maybe North Carolina, maybe, Michigan, but he's going to fall short in just 1 or 2 of those states. And that is what might make Joe Biden president.
Okay. Well, Rahm Emanuel, I take it that you are going to pick Biden as the winner, whether it's today or 2 weeks from now.
Your ability to state the obvious is a real gift. Keep it there. Yes, I think that
Thank you,
Biden. Yeah, I think so. Here's the way I look at it, and we can go all the sophistication. There's a simple question: who'd you rather be, Biden or Trump at this point? And when you go down the kind of big metrics, the possibility of different maps, Biden has multiple maps. Trump has a very narrow one kind of roadmap. 2, resources. Who'd you rather be? Joe Biden. 3, when you look at the voters' Biden has a bigger coalition, a breadth of a coalition. Trump has a very narrow vote base. So when you go through all the metrics, it just goes Biden, 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 Biden. And so it doesn't mean politics is dynamic affairs and things can happen, events can happen. But I do caution, the nominee of the Supreme Court was going to energize the base, the opening, never materialized. There was going to be, all these other things along the way. The president was going to show that we were turning the corner on COVID. That was going to, the foreign policy success in the Mideast, that was going to change the dynamics. None of this is fair because in the end of the day, this is a race of Trump versus Trump, and Trump is losing that race. This is in many ways a narcissist's dream, which is it's all about me. And yes, it's all about you. And Joe Biden's proved that you can actually run a front porch strategy, so to say, even though he's out campaigning, where he allowed Trump to have all the arena. And Trump has done more damage to Trump than anybody else could ever lay a glove on him. And then I kind of conclude and then look at this and say, when you kind of take that scenario down and you look at what Trump has done in the sense of the electorate, he basically, when you look at college educated women, seniors, etc., he has lost all of the anti-Hillary vote. And the one thing I've done in all the polling, I know Alex has talked to pollsters and you go through it, nationally, his job approval is 43%. His vote, 43%. Now, if you go through all the states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin, and you go through North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Iowa, or Arizona, he is getting exactly in those states his job approval number. And everything else, if you don't give him a favorable job approval, you are voting against him. And Biden is in a different place than Hillary was in 2016. Now, if we had all said to you, there's going to be a nominee challenging an incumbent president who's going to be, on average, 9 to 10 points up, that's a landslide. We're all like that dog on the commercial about, the pet that's been abused. We're kind of like, we got 2016 PTSD and we're like flinching, but he's up basically 8 to 10 points. That's a landslide in president. I mean, Barack Obama in 2008, the last time big election, 51-49. He won 53% in his reelect. So these are very formidable numbers. I do think with the one thing, Alex, pollsters have not done a great job. They have to kind of recalibrate how much is going to be African American, how much is going to be Hispanic, how much is going to be Serbian, and you ask them to kind of reformulate it. It tightens a little, but in the end of the day, Hillary never got above 48%. Biden consistently in the national as well as states is above 50, and that is a big deal, even in a four-way race.
What about a couple of things, and this is for both of you, what about a couple of things that have been out there lately that the Republicans are crowing about, really boosting their voter registration rates and activities, and that they're really, especially in some of the key states, they're really matching or starting to overcome voter registration rates. Is that an issue? And is also the whole issue of COVID and how they're campaigning, that Biden and his campaign is reluctant to do the hand-to-hand, door-to-door, face-to-face campaigning because of COVID, whereas the Trump campaign and his supporters are not so reluctant, and that might make a difference. Anything to either one of those arguments? Well, Alex?
Oh, well, a couple of things. For the past 3 years until COVID hit, Republican registration was outpacing Democrat registration in a lot of places. And that gives Republicans something to work with. They have invested a lot in the ground game. They do have an intense, but maybe certainly not a majority size core of Trump voters to work with and get out. But I agree with the mayor that, we don't have Hillary Clinton to kick around anymore. The alternative to Trump is more acceptable than it was. We didn't know who Trump was in 2016. A lot of voters know now. Nevertheless, I think this is not one of these elections that is you look at just one way. I think Rahm could be right. This could be a blowout. If the polls are right and what he's talking about, we're going to be sitting there election night and we're going to know. But I do think there is a slight chance, less than 50%, maybe by a fair amount, that those Trump voters, their world has not changed and they're still out there. If anything, I think two things are true. One is they're more intense than they've ever been. The Supreme Court issue, the Rahm that you mentioned, yeah, it would have been better if Trump had delayed that until after the election, because now there's one less reason to vote for it. Politically, he actually did what we want politicians to do, which is he didn't put politics first. He did the dumb political thing. But politically, those Trump voters, if anything, there's more intensity in them, and the public embarrassment factor, the shy Trump voter, is even greater. If you were embarrassed to vote to tell anybody you were voting for Trump in 2016, oh my God, now you've got race to add on top of that. Now you've got COVID to add on top. There's even more reason to lie to a pollster. So I think either we're looking at the blowout Rahm mentioned, but watch out election night, because those Rust Belt states have been getting redder. Remember, Missouri used to be a swing state. Then it became red. Ohio used to be a swing state. Now it's red. These states like Pennsylvania are increasingly becoming less suburban. That's what's painting the North Carolinas of the world bluer.
Right.
But it's making these Rust Belt swing states redder.
Right.
Don't rule it out yet. Don't
Okay.
bet. If I had to bet my house, I'd bet on Biden.
Please.
If I had to bet Rahm's house, I'd bet on Trump.
Hey, so
We can
Rahm,
get
how
you a
about you?
refinance. We're going to get
Oh, yeah.
Alex a refinance there then. So I'm less to your core question, Laura. The registration, while I look at two other things that I would say before I even looked at that. One is who's voting right now, because we all say election day. There's 30 plus million already voted. So you have an indication, all the campaigns do, who's voting. Are you pulling people from November forward, et cetera? And that's clearly not happening. And the Democratic performance now, overall of the 30, when you get more specific by state, there's some a little more choppiness in there on states. Number two, so I look there. Then the other thing, and this is why the Supreme Court ruling recently about Pennsylvania is getting to the ballot and how they count ballots. To me, that's a bigger issue than the registration over the last year went from X, Y. Not that that's not a big deal. It is. You ask me how do I measure that? I don't get, that's not where I take my Ambien to try to get to sleep. My Ambien get to sleep is, can you vote? How are they going to count it? When it arrives? When's it postmarked? Etc. That to me is a bigger issue. And then starting to understand performance in the big three up north in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, where actually, if you look at it, the average right now is around 6%, Biden's up, and he's above 50 in all three, versus North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona, where Biden's below 50, hitting in the 48, 49 range, but the average there is more 2.5 to 3. The second thing is, I think it's more likely election night, we're going to be able to declare the path, meaning let's just play one scenario out. Georgia's now a battleground. Trump acknowledged that by going to Macon, Georgia, his first day post, getting back on the track. If Georgia goes blue, not an impossibility, not a probability, it's just competitive. We're going to be able to declare Trump has no path to the presidency unless these 20 and all 20 happen. You're more likely to get the person who's won, declared a winner a week later, but you'll be able to declare the path or lack thereof election night. That's what
So
I think
so Rahm, you're expecting the possibility that we may not be able to actually declare definitively election night, or maybe even a day or two after that, but we will have a sense of who that's likely to be.
I think you'll have a better sense of who it's likely to be, because you'll be able to say the path, which was narrow, now it's a tightrope. Because if take just one state, if Georgia falls, and that's obviously on the southeast side on the time clock there, and that will tell you that the path for the president, because it was in the column before, is out of the column now. You'll be able my assumption is on election night, we'll know about a path more than we'll know about and a presumptive president, where it may take when you're done counting to declare. I'm
Right.
putting,
Right. Well, Alex, that raises the question that's worrying. I know you want to jump in on
I
this.
just want to say one thing. It's putting the word declare to the side and more presumptive on election night. Okay.
Right. And the whole, but that raises another question about Trump's claim that he may not accept the results if he feels there's been fraud, if he feels that the election was stolen from him. So Alex, is that something that's going to play into Rahm's analysis, and is that something that keeps you up at night?
Not especially. I don't think we're going to be in that situation. One thing that what does keep me up at night is that usually you want to tell your voters to go out and vote. And this is the only campaign I've seen. Donald Trump told his voters, don't vote. Now, that's probably pretty poor campaign strategy. Now, he meant, can't trust the mail-in voting, the absentee ballots. We're all home with COVID. And I would say that it's probably poor campaign strategy to urge your voters not to vote. Who listens to Donald Trump? His supporters. He said mail-in voting can't be trusted. Okay, well, guess what? They heard him, and they didn't show up in these early voting. So what do we have to do? Well, now that voting at the polls is open in many states and election day, he's got to produce a massive turnout. So if he loses a close election here, it might have been because he urged his voters not to vote, which I would recommend most political consultants not to embrace as a strategy.
Alex, I think you're dressing it up by calling it a strategy.
Yeah, it might be. I don't think the transition of power here is going to be a big issue. Either, I think we've dealt with this before in Florida with Bush and Gore. I think Republicans that you have, everybody understands that the good of the country is going to come first in these moments. It may take a while to count if it's close, but I think Rahm's right. There's a chance that the path will be precluded. But look, right now, I was looking at the Real Clear Politics political averages. Trump is down 1.6 in Florida. To me, that means he wins Florida. Biden is up 2 in Iowa. That's not enough for Biden in Iowa. Michigan, it's 7. Well, I've seen surveys there that have Trump up 2. So I think we've got a shot in Michigan. North Carolina, 2.3. If there aren't at least 2 or 3% of embarrassed Trump voters out there, I just don't see how it's impossible. So I think we're going to see a closer election.
Okay, let's talk about tomorrow night, big last debate. Rahm, how crucial is that debate for either candidate, and what does Vice President Biden have to do to win that debate, essentially?
Not be Trump, just not being him. I mean, look, I really can't stress it. If you go back to the first debate, what Joe Biden picked up very well was he looked right at the camera, said, this is not about me, it's not about you, it's about your American family, and this is your election, and it's about your kid's future. And that was not Donald Trump. And so that's number one. Number two is, I actually would reverse the question. This is the last exit off the highway for Donald Trump to change. The last. I'm not even sure even a successful debate will do it, but that said. So the real burden is on Trump. The strategy for Biden is being clear, calm, direct to the camera about, I'm a byproduct of Bill Clinton's race, and that's my beginning in national. He said in New Hampshire when he was getting hammered, the hits on me are nothing like the hits your kids are going to take if we don't turn this country around. And the more we make this about the voters and less about the two personalities, the better Joe Biden will be. He did that successfully in the first one. And I said this at the town hall side. The most important thing going on is we're sitting here analyzing it, and he's still answering questions. It was amazingly respectful of the voters. Trump was done, walked, left. Every time Joe Biden answered a question, he looked right at he said, did I answer it successful? And then he asked the young man, give me your number, let's talk, keep it. There was a level of decency, a level of respect to the voters. And so to me, the burden's on Trump. He needs a home run. One
And the-
single word for Joe Biden.
And what does he
And I
need
don't
to
know,
do?
and I don't know crap about baseball, and I just used 2 metaphors about it. I don't know nothing.
Okay,
there.
so I guess I'll throw that to Alex then. So what does Trump need to do to, do you agree that with Rahm that this is his sort of last lane or one of his last lanes? And what does he need to do to fix his problem with the debate tomorrow night?
Well, I think he should thank the moderators for the mute button, that they're going to mute him while he's talking, while Biden is giving his first 2 minutes of answer. That's a gift for Trump, because in that first debate, the president acted like a jerk. And guess what? Voters didn't like it. If he were Donald Trump, as he is in these rallies where he's fun and he's telling jokes and he's looking at the camera like Rahm just suggested that Biden is doing, that's a much more agreeable, it makes the medicine go down of Trump a little bit easier. What does he need to do?
I'm not sure that's cherry flavored aspirin.
I'm sorry, say again?
I said I didn't think that was cherry flavored aspirin when you said make the medicine go.
Well, if I were Trump, I would say, look, I know I'm a bridge too far for a lot of people. And it's me. It's personally. And that's who I am. Sometimes I can act like a jerk, but it's not about who's the best or worst person. This is about who's best or worst for the country. I urge you to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris if you want to defund the police, if you want to raise taxes, if you want to add more Puerto Rico and other states to the US Senate, if you want to expand the Supreme Court with a bunch of liberals, if that's what you want. Now, is there any chance Trump will do that? None.
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 And why is that? And why is that, Alex? He hasn't done it yet. He can't change.
And that's who the president of the United States is. Look, there was a wonderful old movie called Shane, the gunslingers, right? Little people in a Western town. The bad guys had taken over the town and they had a killer, Jack Palance, the guy in the black hat. And he was killing the townspeople. So what did the good guys do? The little farmers, they had to hire a killer too, a gunslinger, to fight for them. But at the end of, and he did, but at the end of the day, the killer's still a killer and he couldn't stay. Shane had to leave town. And that's Donald Trump. He is the T-Rex at the end of the Lost World movie. If we remember that Steven Spielberg's movie, Rahm, you remember that one? The raptors were going to eat the kids. And what happened? Well, the T-Rex came in and the kids got away. But that's Donald Trump. His supporters know who he is. They know he's a predator. He's a political predator. He's the alpha predator in the political jungle. But his voters were so desperate and saw the threat from the raptors, said they saw that threat from Washington so vividly in their lives that they said, even this is better. And that threat has really not changed all that much.
Can I, a couple of things I would say. Look, when you vote for, there's a different type of vote for a chief executive versus a legislator, having run for both. And when you're a chief executive, people look at person and then policy. When you're running for legislature, it's policy, then person. And the unfortunate, and Donald Trump, Alex is not wrong, in 2016, he was this disruptor that was going to be the instrument of people's anger, both towards Washington, towards Wall Street, towards the entertainment industry. But this election now is one of change, Joe Biden versus disruptor. And after 3.5 years of knowing the disruption, people are turned, it's more than they bargained for. And his problem is he's running for president, and Alex is right, but to his voters, which are a smaller piece of the population, his disruption and character is what they want. To everybody else, suburban voters, college educated voters, the seniors, where he says it is what it is, his disrupt is more than they want. And so the character piece, which is higher in a chief executive position in the equation of how you make a decision on who you're going to vote for than it is for a legislative position, the metrics of this works against him. Last time it did, because there was a percentage that wasn't going to vote for Hillary, and he was a beneficiary. Today's election, basically all those anti-Hillary voters have basically been, after 3.5 years, they think they got a bad deal out of this. And we can't underestimate, in my view, like when Bill Clinton beat George Herbert Walker Bush, beating an incumbent is a hard exercise. It's so rare that it has ever happened. Out of the last 16, I think it's only 4 times that's happened in the last 100 years. It's very hard, but you have a situation that I think that Donald Trump took remember, he got 46% last time. He didn't get 50.
Mm.
In key constituencies, both demographic and geographic, and he's opened up, and you can see it now by looking at maps. I mean, I'm sorry. Alex said Iowa. Joe Biden was running 6 points down there. He's now 2 points up. That's an 8-point swing. That's not a statistical error. That's not a rounding error. And Iowa was never on anybody's map. The president went to Georgia to kick off the restart of his campaign, the rebooting in Macon, Georgia. If I told you 4 months ago, 2 months ago, Alex, would you take the over-under that the president, if he was going to get back on the campaign trail, would start it off in Macon, Georgia? What would be the over-under on that?
Well,
To me,
listen, I think you could be right,
speaks
Ron. That's why I'm
volumes.
smoking my victory cigar now.
That's your new Cuban. But what I'm looking at, Alex, is your new Cuban policy over there.
I'm trying to save cigars from communism one at a time.
So let's move on. There's been a couple of trends that I wanted to touch on in recent weeks that may play out as we move toward the election. One is Alex, Barack Obama's on the campaign trail today, big time. He's going to be doing rallies and a number of other events for Joe Biden. He feels kind of late to me in terms of his close and very formal relationship with the vice president. But what do you expect out of that, and how much of a difference can that make in the campaign?
I think it helps Joe Biden. Look, I think Barack Obama is the premier campaigner we've had in this country. Maybe I'd give Bill Clinton a little slight, at his prime, a little bit of a plus there. But I said once that listening to Barack Obama's speech was a lot like sex. The worst you ever had was still excellent. And I mean, the guy's great. And what does he do? He makes Joe Biden acceptable. But I think it's all right that he didn't campaign for Biden for a while. Biden needed time to be his own guy and to be a president, and not to be Obama's vice president. So I don't think that's an issue. It'll help. Okay. Democrats need big base black turnout, and Obama helps there, but he helps in the suburbs. He helps everywhere. I think that's you bring in your relief pitcher late in the game to close it out. That's not bad strategy at all. And who does Donald Trump have to embrace? Him, and to bring in and to wrap his arms around him and say, no, it's okay. No one. And
he's the whole show. He's the whole show.
So, but this election still, as Rahm said, it's about Trump. Love him or hate him. There's no in between. If you haven't figured that out, where have you been the past 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Alex said. I'd add one other thing though to that. While it's right about this constituency, that constituency, he's hot. One, he's going to Pennsylvania because of the big 3 up north. It's the most narrow. I've seen Michigan's 8, Wisconsin 6, Pennsylvania 5. But the bigger thing is actually narrative, because I think people have a high appreciation for the decency of not only around the former president personally, but B, also around the narrative of a time where things got done, where there was a decency in the Oval Office, et cetera. So I would add to Alex's, yes, about base turnout, yes, about suburban vote, et cetera, but also the narrative of that was it feels like almost another era, and that we want that kind of normalcy again. And that I would add, again, I want to say I agree with everything Alex said, but just there's a narrative piece that is important to that, that's more than just the constituency appeal.
I think that's right. And the last time the country was really united was those brief moments after Barack Obama was elected to his first term. And I think there's still a bit of nostalgia for that, more than nostalgia. The country is hungry for coming together.
The country's hungry to get back. I mean, there is, as I said, this disruption by Donald Trump is more than anybody bargained for, and they don't want it anymore.
Well,
You know, let me say this on an incumbent re-election, Laura. There's 2 points. There's 2 models. There is the Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan model, which is Morning in America, a bridge over the 21st century. Then there's the Barack Obama, George Bush 43 model, which is you make it a binary choice. George Bush made John Kerry too risky in a war of terror, and Bill Clinton said that this is going to be an economy. Who do you want to handle? A guy who's plutocrat or somebody that actually brought the auto industry. That was it. It was a binary choice versus, and Donald Trump with the economy pre-COVID, et cetera, wanted to run that model. And he wanted to run against Bernie Sanders. And he's trying to put Bernie Sanders on the ticket right now. And he has not actually picked either one of them. And so he's left the only choice, which is this is a referendum on him. And in the end of the day, a re-election is play him or trade him. It's not that complicated. And that is the choice. And right now, people are saying, given COVID, given the economy, given the culture of the presidency, trade him.
You know, this conversation leads me to one of the questions from the audience. We have several great questions, and I'm going to jump in here with this one. Regardless of election results, what are your predictions and hopes for how we can reunite our country based on values rather than sticking to political party issues? Alex?
I think reuniting the country is going to be very hard right now. The Democrats, let's say Joe Biden wins for a moment. If he did, a lot of Democrats are going to think that voters ratified their agenda, when in fact, it may be that I think it's much more likely that voters rejected Donald Trump, as Rahm has said, exhausted with him, with the disruption. So Democrats are going to put up that agenda. And when America actually sees that agenda and what it is, I think what happened with Obamacare is going to pale compared to the rejection Democrats are going to confront. Now, what does it take to get beyond that? Well, right now, the Republican Party doesn't really exist. It is Donald Trump. Somewhere out there over the future, there's a populist conservative party that will reemerge generationally beyond Donald Trump. But Donald Trump mowed down the Republican Party, wiped it out, and took it over, an outsider business guy, because we were so hollow. All we could do is say no. No, Democrats are bad, they're spending too much. And we didn't compete for governance. We didn't say, here's how we're going to lead the country into the future. Here's a better way. Democrats, they're in just as bad a shape or worse. They're the big manual typewriter party, industrial age, top-down government. Programs that don't work. Hey, we've got another top-down, old, artificial assembly line program for you from Washington. Political, artificial problem solving from the Washington policy factory. You know, it's like legislative wish making. We'll pass a law and make a wish and everything will be all right. We don't have to do it from the bottom up. So what's it going to take? Our government's going to have to look a lot more like what's working in our lives. An open society, a bottom-up society where Washington isn't the only thing that governs us, where my business provides healthcare. Washington provides healthcare. Who's governing? Well, we all can. There isn't just one tool in our toolbox. What will change? What will unite the country? When someone comes along and says, we have more tools in our toolbox to govern ourselves. When a Republican says, why do you want to govern us the old way? Why do you want to govern us top down politically and artificially from Washington when we can open this up? Look, this cell phone connects you to everything in the world. Why can't you, if you can see it, why can't you govern it? That generational change is coming, but it needs to come for Democrats too, not just my party. Until that happens, you've got two busted clocks. Which should you buy?
Yeah.
Well, neither. Neither. You
Neither
can't
one of them
unite.
Neither one of them are telling the right time. Rahm, what's your take about this issue of hope and uniting the country again and uniting it around the question of values rather than political parties?
Well, let me a couple things. One is I think there's more unity in the country than sometimes the media pretends. And I'm not saying there's not divisions, but there is places on a whole host of issues, et cetera, where you find 65, 68% of the country supporting. And I would be very, in a White House, very attentive to that. Number two, I think there's a larger project, I've talked about this before, where we reignite and rewind, reweave our sense of citizenship. Now, I would just say to you, as a father of 3 college or post-college kids, the Donald Trump's contribution to politics is a reignited civic engagement that we haven't seen in decades. He didn't intend that, but that's what's happened. And I've advocated this in not only my book, but I've done in my first book ever. I'm a big believer in this, of some form of national service required of everybody between high school and college. And the more you do, the more you'll get benefits towards your college or post-high school education. To me, this is a long-term project, not just a checkbox. I passed a bill, etc. And I think today's kids, or I say because they're my children's age, are hungry for that civic engagement. I also think that there's issues that the media does not pay attention to, that there are consensus there. Then third, you have to be attuned to that consensus and not, one of the things that the American people are not going to be for is Donald Trump from his anger base. They're not really interested in replacing his anger with another form of anger. And whether you like it or not, and I wrote about this once about Biden Republicans, I actually think the Republican Party has a lot of soul searching. I don't think Donald Trump's going to walk off when he loses. He's going to tweet from wherever he is, and he's going to demand a fidelity to him. And I think the Republican Party is hostile to science. You can see it in climate change. You can see it in COVID. That is opening up a group of voters that Democrats never got, because that's not who they are. There's a whole element in that Republican Party that is not going to snap back to a George Bush, John McCain, Bob Dole era. Now, Democrats have to be both smart and strategic about not only finding that place, but then the solutions that are very clear to those problems and don't look like they're going awry from the coalition. Now, remember, one of the reasons Donald Trump's in the trouble is he basically, over the last 3.5 years, I'm summarizing this at a tip level because it's more deeper than this, everybody who voted against Hillary but voted for him, he's honked off. And Joe Biden right now, if you look at each state by state, is getting about 8 to 11 points of Republican votes. And being attentive to how you won, who you won with, and then developing the policies that cement that victory, so it's more an affirmation of you rather than just merely a rejection of the other. That's what good politics and good policy is, which is why everybody says good policy is good politics.
Mm-hmm. I want to bring it, at least in terms of my perspective about Chicago, I'll bring it home a little bit, and that's around the whole, I think, Alex, you mentioned the black vote earlier, and there's a lot of conversation around how the civil unrest protests over the last year almost have impacted this campaign. How are those protests that are calling for racial justice likely to affect the turnout among black voters? And will the impact will there be any impact from the violence that came out of some of those protests? How will that affect the campaign, or how will that affect each side? Alex, I want to start with you. Is there any effect that this is going to have on black turnout? And then also, will it hurt or help either campaign?
Well, I'll let the mayor talk a little more about how it impacts the Democratic Party. He is certainly better versed in that than I am. But I'll tell you some things we've seen happen over the past few months in a lot of the survey work. And that is that at first the country was united after George Floyd because everybody saw a murder. And the country said, no, this is not who we are. And that's Trump voters, everybody. And there's a moment we had there, talk about unity. And then all of a sudden, it not only turned to kind of a movement seemed to get hijacked, but it not only turned to violence in the streets and looting, it turned into something else. It turned into blaming that working class Trump voter for being an evil, horrible person. And he was shocked. That Trump voter was shocked. He said, wait, no, that's not me. Some of those were Obama Trump voters. And so what happened is that's when some of the tightening began to happen. Those voters started to come back because they don't see themselves as evil voters who need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They see themselves as good, hardworking Americans who are treated constantly with disrespect. And so I think that's how this summer has affected some voters in a pro-Trump way. Now, what has it done? It's also, I think, helped Trump with some Hispanic voters because we're seeing Trump bump up there. And when you see that violence, if you're wealthy, if you're an elite Republican, you can insulate yourself in your gated community. But if you're just a working guy trying to make it in this country and you've got your little store or your truck or your work in construction, that violence is all around you. And I think that may have helped Trump a little too. Now, I'll argue the other side here to give Rahm a launching pad, and that is if you're a suburban mom, do you think there will be a minute of racial peace in this country as long as Donald Trump is president? I'm not sure you can. How do you do that? How do you make that case? And the country is hungry for that now too. So that's my hope for Joe Biden if he wins. And again, I'm not saying he will. I think he probably will. But if he wins, he's going to have a window. And I hope he doesn't do what Obama did, which is, hey, let's go left. Let's do Obamacare. This is take advantage of a crisis, Rahm. I hope he actually finds some common ground there. And I think that would be the wiser political course.
Rahm.
So I think there are three telling moments, and one is I thought that when Joe Biden went to Kenosha, Wisconsin, he did it after Trump went, and one looked like a president trying to solve a problem and bring people together, and the other person looked like the source of the problem. Nobody looks at an issue today facing America and says Donald Trump is the ticket to that solving that problem. And his big problem right now, or challenge to his president re-election, is he is seen as a source of that problem. So there are policies addressed in and around racial and civil disruption, but there's also a culture and a sense of dialogue and accord. And Donald Trump is seen as exacerbating problems rather than the solution to the problem. Where Joe Biden, whatever you want to say, is not not seen that way, and B, seen more as somebody who's striving to find ground. I want to say one, put a pin there, I'll come right back. The very qualities that people attack Joe Biden for in the primary are the very things that are answering the question today. And you got to give the Biden campaign credit. When they talked about the soul of the nation, et cetera, 15 months ago, they were seeing around 3 different bend turns of where we would be on this election. And seeing people attack Joe Biden in primary for bipartisanship, trying to find common ground, et cetera, it is exactly the contrast you want with Trump now. And it actually, those who criticize him were wrong about that. Number 2, I think one of the, there was a famous, if you go to the town hall debate, Clinton, Perot, Bush, woman asked a question about the deficit economy. George Bush couldn't answer it, said, I'm not sure what you're asking. President Clinton approaches her, then Governor Clinton, and says, let me tell you what I think you're asking. At that time, George Bush looked at his watch. That was a telling moment that the time had run out on a president dominated by foreign policy who was bored by domestic. That's what that one moment said. Bill Clinton approached her, said, I think this is, the deficit matters to you. I think her question was about the deficit in the economy. And he took it and he approached her and it made it about her life. And George Bush was like, when the hell do I get out of here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When Joe Biden was in Minnesota, just about 3 weeks ago, there was a protester and he went over unscripted and elbow bumped him and said, I'm gonna be your president too. And the guy laughed and they had a good chuckle. And that decency, that sense of respect for even that, he's not throwing in the towel on somebody who disagrees with him, that you can't do that to a fellow American. Things that, again, in the primary he got attacked for is exactly the type of character traits people want as the antidote and the answer to Donald Trump. And so when you look at all the racial strife, civil disobedience, he is exactly, I think it will have an impact on the vote. I think as if you go older among African Americans, you go also among suburban voters, that is going to be the type of person you want to address this. And I don't know what that will do. My instincts tell me you're going to have, based on what we're seeing in the early votes, a higher turnout among young voters as a whole and young voters of color. The only thing that I'm still kind of scratching my head, and I'm going to look forward to this, how Donald Trump still has appeal among African American men below the age of 45. I don't quite get it, but that's I think it will have that type of appeal.
So we just have a few minutes left, and I want to pick up on one more audience question, and that is about down ballot races. Specifically, this person asked, what Senate races are you both watching the closest and why? Either Senate or other races that you could give us a couple examples, Alex.
I think Cory Gardner is in trouble, the Republican in Colorado. Colorado's become California, so that's one down. I think Arizona's not looking good for McSally. I think Susan Collins is in big trouble in Maine. But I do think Republicans have a good shot of picking up Michigan with John James. Kansas is now in trouble. Mitch McConnell's pouring money into there. You've got two new faces a new face on each side there. So the Senate's going to be tight, I think. But I'm watching that Michigan race because that could be a fresh new face for Republicans there. Let me add one quick thing, though, about I hate it when I have to agree with Rahm because he's right about all of this.
So do I.
Yeah. I thought he was dead right about that, but I'll offer an alternative scenario about Trump. You're in a locked room with Donald Trump and you don't like the guy personally. Why do you stay? Why do Republican voters stay with him? You know who he is. He makes sure you know who he is. He's proud of it. The only reason you stay in that room with him is because you look, there's one door out and it leads where? It leads to more of the same. It leads to the same Democratic Party. No, it's even worse. It leads to a fairly radical left of center agenda. Well, it didn't work for the Democrats before, put it on steroids. So can Donald Trump convince enough people to stay in that room? The law of the fireman. When your house is on fire, maybe you don't care so much about who the fireman slept with last night and what he said at the bar. You want somebody to put the fire out, especially if outside the door, more people with matches. And so he's still got a shot here.
So to your first question, Laura, because I want to pick up on what Alex said. Your first question is, I think all of them, for lack of a better way of saying it, because, and I have, my own view is if the White House goes blue, the Senate's going to go blue. It's very hard to see the White House going this way and the Senate going that way. When you go through, not just where the battleground states are vis-a-vis the presidential and where the Senate are, you obviously Arizona's a battleground and you got a Senate thing like that, but it's going to be the path for Democrats in the Senate slightly different than the White House. There's just X amount of battlefield races. And so I think you got to watch all of them. There's obviously, I mean, there's 33 up, but there's about a third that's up that are going to determine whether you have a Senate that works with a new president. So, you know, there's obviously Iowa that's now competitive because Joe Biden's not a drag there. That's also true about Montana. It's true about Alaska. Alex is right about Michigan in that area. Then you know all the others. But I also think if Georgia is competitive there, you got 2 Senate races, more likely you get 1 out of the 2, which is unusual. To the second point I want to bring up, what Alex said, that, you know, Trump hasn't done what Alex said this whole hour and a half. Hasn't done one of them, okay? But this is something the Democrat, and it gets to this first question before this that you asked, that they got to realize. Not just who voted for them, et cetera, and how they voted, et cetera, which is, look, Bill Clinton wins in 1992, and 94, the Congress goes to Gingrich and the Republicans. And there's a lot of factors, but one was an overreach on healthcare. Right. So you went through this bust. Barack Obama gets elected, delivers on healthcare, and his presidency is different because of the 2010, comes back and destroys all the progress done in 06 and 08 with Democrats. So how do you get away from this boom and bust that Democrats have experienced? Because remember, in 2002, George Bush picked up seats right after his presidency. Bill Clinton lost the House and Barack lost the House. One passed healthcare, one did not pass healthcare. So the Democrats, if Biden does win and gets the Senate, by developing an agenda that not only addresses the problem, but smooths out and does not create a boom and bust, because both of their presidencies are different after that midterm. Now, for another time, I have a lot of thoughts about that, but that's all my thing is. You got to think about that and be smart to that, because for both of them, the presidency at that event is a lot different than the first 2 years.
Well, we've had a lot of great, smart conversation today, and I have one more quick final one for you guys. Have you voted yet, and how? If you have, how did you vote, or how do you plan to vote? Alex?
I voted on day 1 in person.
Day 1 in person at the early voting. What's that?
I did the Chicago tradition. I took everybody in Grace Cemetery with me, and we all did it together.
I am a citizen of the great state of Florida right now, swing state. And so my wife and I, on 9 days before the election, you can designate someone to pick up your ballot. They're going to send them to us up here. We will get them and mail them back despite what my president says. And we're going to help Donald Trump carry Florida.
Oh, so that's why you're so optimistic about Florida. Well, I voted on Sunday, and even though there's been long lines all week in Chicago, I did it during the Bears game, so that was smart. There was no lines. Thanks to both of you, and it's been a great conversation. I'll turn it back over to Margaret for closing remarks.
So to add to it, I did a mail-in ballot, but I went and dropped it in the early voting box. So I kind of did a hybrid of both. So thank you all so much. That's all I wanted to say. I know your schedules are incredibly busy right now, and we're so appreciative of the time that you took with us. Thank you so much. And for those of you listening, please vote. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.